Hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. And today I'm truly honored and blessed to welcome ultra runner Zukie Tandathu. Hopefully, I'm saying that the right way. This man has had an incredible journey through the world of ultra running, including running 874 miles across 29 days, which is certainly something you don't hear every day. In addition to his ultra running achievements, Zuki is also an ambassador for multiple brands, including Sun Gods, Lake District Trails, and is part of the North Face Explorer team as well. So today we're going to be talking through his life, his journey, not only through sports, but as always with my interviews, the mindset that it takes to reach such a high level in such an extreme form of endurance, which practically seems superhuman from where I'm sitting, but we'll find out more about that in due course. But Zuki, thank you so much for coming on the show and thank you for making the time for this today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Liam. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it's a great thing because, like we were saying earlier, I know you're preparing for certain upcoming races and everything, and you've got a lot of things going on. So the fact you've made the time for this, I'm very, very grateful. So we let's go back to the beginning and talk about that briefly before we delve fully into your running achievements. You're originally from South Africa, but you came to the UK at a young age. How old were you when you first came to the UK, please?
Yeah. So as you said, so I was originally from South Africa, and I was born in Port Elizabeth on the south coast in South Africa, and then I moved over to the UK when I was 14 years old. So in fact, it was just before, if, I think, a few weeks before my 14th birthday. So in March. Yeah. So yeah.
There's a big transition for someone of such a young age, I must say. How did you find transitioning to a new culture and everything is quite different, especially the weather, but the people are
Yeah.
quite different as well. Can you share with us just a little bit about your experiences at that time and whether it was an easy transition or more of a difficult transition for you at such a young age?
I would say it was generally mixed, I would say, because obviously, I went from not speaking English, full time at home as it was just a it's a second language, obviously, and then obviously moving into England, and my mum obviously was South African, and she got married to an Englishman, so obviously, we generally most of the time in the house obviously just we had to communicate in English. So that was a first little one thing to get used to, if that makes sense. So you're speaking now a different language as your first language, and then obviously I think in school I was probably the only black kid as well in the school that I was in, and yeah, well, one of the few anyway. So yeah, so it's a different culture. You're getting used to the different surroundings as well, and like you said, the weather's different. And yeah, and I generally just found, why was he getting dark so early in this place? I was asking myself that question sometimes, but no, it was, but obviously my parents, helped with the transition and it looked after me, and yeah, it was good.
Well, that's why I've chosen to start there because it's a very brave thing to be going through, if you like. It takes
Mm.
bravery, it takes courage, I think, to adapt to a wholly new environment at a young age. And I think that's testament to your strength of will and everything. I know you had the family support by the sound of it, but in my mind, it links possibly to your strength of will of everything that would come later. On the subject of sports, were you always very athletic when you were growing up, maybe back in South Africa, maybe when you were first in the UK. Was sports always part of your life, or did it sort of come a little later?
No, I would say I was generally sporty as a young child. So my friends and I back in South Africa, we played various sports. We'd play in our local streets. If it was in the summer, you'd find us playing cricket with the tennis ball and maybe sometimes some makeshift bats. And sometimes, hand tennis in the summer if we'd been watching tennis on TV. Obviously football as well. Uh, and then what else? Yeah, I think, and then we'd have a go at rugby as well sometimes, mainly touch rugby. But that was generally quite sporty. And then obviously in school as well, I took part in various sports as well. So yeah, I was quite sporty.
Absolutely. Well, quite a few sports you mentioned there. I mean, I know
Yeah.
you're a very humble person, but that's a lot of sports, to be playing. So, wow, fair play to you. Well done. Obviously, as we'll be talking about today, running, being what you're known for, today, let's talk about where that first started specifically in terms of, what lit the fire inside of you to run, competitively, to obviously push your limits and everything that we'll get to with that shortly. But starting at the beginning, what was your sort of initial inspiration for that, please?
Yeah, so uh, well, obviously, like I said before, I was quite sporty anyway growing up, and then I think the I did a little bit of running, and then but it wasn't great distances or anything like that. And then fast forward then a little bit, I moved to England, and after school at 18, I then joined the military. And then, in the military, obviously, we have to keep fit and we have various assessments throughout the year, etc. And we'd run sometimes, 4 or 5 miles or so, but then I would then run sometimes in my spare time, by myself. Yeah, and then after a while, a friend of mine, Matthew Foster, he was always doing ultra running, really long distances. So he'd come back after the weekend, and he'd start telling us about how he ran 50 miles, 100 miles, and so on and so forth. And then I think after some time, I took an interest, and then I thought, I wonder if I could do this some of this running that this my friend is doing. And I think I did join him on my first ultra run, which was my 32 miler in Lulworth. So yeah, and then from there I haven't looked back, I don't think. So
Wow. So that's how it started. That is incredible. So with that 32-mile one, was that your first competitive race, if you like? In terms of, I know obviously with the military, there's that aspect of the training, and in
mm.
your own time, it sounds like you were sort of competing with yourself. But was that your first sort of organized race then, the 32-mile one?
I would say that was my first ultra. Yeah, that was my first ultra run, organized. Yeah, and it was a nice ultra, a bit hilly and yeah, quite warm as well. Actually, I remember it now. It's coming back, but no, it was a good day. It was a good challenge. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in terms of your military service and everything that you mentioned there, you'll have to sort of fill me in on the timeline of this. Is that something that you're still doing now? Are you still serving, or have you finished with that and moved into civilian life, as they say?
No, I'm still serving, so I'll be hitting my 20-year point in September. And then I think so 2.5 years away from retirement. So yeah, and then that'll be 22 years, obviously, in 2.5 years time. So yeah, uh, yeah, it's been a
Extraordinary.
it's been a while.
Absolutely, but it's obviously something you enjoy. And as you mentioned earlier, with the military side of things, there is a crossover with sports and athletics, and there's a crossover with the outdoors as well. Do you find that that sort of complements, if you get what I mean, they sort of complement each other in terms of the military gives you the ability to be in the outdoors and to train and to push yourself. Would you say that there's like a balance there, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I would agree with you. I would say, the 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 outdoors, obviously, and military life, they kind of complement each other nicely. Um, and yeah, I think it's probably one of the reasons why I found doing ultra running an easy transition, because obviously of my background as well. So it certainly helped. And then obviously, as I'm sure we'll probably touch on later, comes to the sustainability factors, to keep yourself going for a long time. So yeah, so some of the foundations were laid by the military experiences, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely, it makes a lot of sense how there's a crossover there and everything, you know. So we mentioned the first competitive race, the 32 mile race, which is quite cool in itself because you sort of jumped in the deep end there and everything as well, and you know, there's no little half marathons or anything, it's straight into an ultra. So, how many races have you run all in all in terms of like in terms of including ultras, including any lesser mileage, normal marathons, or all in all? Because shortly we'll talk about the 874-mile one, and we'll talk about a few specifics. But I just wondered if you know how many it is all in all.
I would say there is a half marathon there that I did do. And then obviously the 32 miler, and then I'm thinking back now as I'm talking. So then there's a 50 miler, 40 miler, and a 268 miler, 100 miler, another 220 odd miler, uh, and then the 874 miles in 29 days. There was also another challenge which was 600 miles and I did that in about 21 or 22 days, I think. And then recently solo challenge. So we probably up to about 10, I think, races, or yeah, thereabouts. So
Wow.
quite a few, quite a few.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
Thank you, because when I was researching this, I've found a few of those being documented and mentioned. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure how many it was all in all, but that is
Yeah.
absolutely exceptional. And I think one that people will really want to hear about. I mean, they're all quite amazing in their own way. To hone in for a moment on the 874 miles, I mean,
Mm.
I think that it's something that obviously people who know running and know about this sort of thing will understand this, but to include the layman and people who are not as familiar with that world and that lifestyle as well, can you explain to us how it works? I mean, obviously you're running across all different types of terrain, and obviously you're running for many hours of the day. Presumably you stop to rest at points in time during
Mm.
that process. When I was reading about this, I did read that you did take breaks here and there, but it's a pretty relentless pursuit, isn't it? So basically, if you had to describe that race and those 29 days in your own words, that's the simplest way. I know that's a pretty big question, but what you remembered and what you enjoyed most about such an immense challenge, please.
Oh, so the 874 miles in 29 days. So that one was a virtual challenge. So that this was during lockdown when obviously, there wasn't too much going on, but you could exercise and so on and so forth. So yeah, that one was virtual. So I was running, I think at the time I was working where I was working, it was 25 miles away from where I lived. So this was when I was working in Newcastle at the time. So sometimes I would run 25 miles into work in the morning, and then I would then run back the other 25 miles, and then that would be 50 miles done, in the day or in a 24-hour period. And then the next day I would do the same and or a little bit more sometimes. And then yeah, and then that's how I built the lead. And what was interesting about it is that you would register the mileage that you did on the day, and then you'd see your icon obviously moving on the map. So yeah, it was a good challenge to have that one. So that was good. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's very cool about how you had to get creative around that as well with the COVID situation. I think that's fascinating in terms of having the flexibility, adaptability to fill the miles different ways. Looking broadly across the races, not so much honing in on a specific one, but looking broadly, obviously you are, as I understand it, out there, not so much with that one, but with some of the others, in different types of
Yeah.
terrain, and you're effectively navigating and running. So as I mentioned earlier, for people who are not as much in the know about this, can you explain how that aspect of it works in terms of being out there in the wilderness and basically finding your way? Because it must have been a different one I read about then, in this case, because when I read about it, you were finding your way through the wilderness. You did stop to take one or two breaks, and you completed maybe it was one of the 200 miles. I'm not sure. You'll have to
Yeah,
fill
yeah.
me.
Oh, yeah. I
But
think
anyway, the wilderness, please tell us how that goes. That'd be lovely. Thank you.
yes, yeah. So I think the one that you might be touching on there is the spine race. So it was a summer spine race. So that one was 268 miles. Altogether, and we started from Edel, I think it is, yeah, in Sheffield, around the Sheffield area, and yeah, and you're making your way up the Pennine Way. And then you eventually you end up in the border of Scotland, um, so in one of the small towns there. Yeah, and it's challenging. Obviously, one of the main things is sustainability. To keep yourself going. But you'd move maybe, say for instance, up to about 20 miles or so at a time, and then there will be a checkpoint there. And then at that checkpoint, you were then allowed to, to rest for a little bit, sort your kit out and so on and so forth. But you were only allowed a maximum of 6 hours in that checkpoint, and then you had to move on to the next checkpoint, obviously. So that keeps you going, that keeps you on track, if that makes sense. Yeah, and then but obviously one of the other challenges is you need to be navigating your way from checkpoint to checkpoint. Although the Payne Way, it's marked generally, but there's times obviously where you might go off course slightly, so you have to be on top of your navigation, and you have to be on top of how you're drinking, how you're eating, and yeah, just looking after yourself in general to get yourself to the finish line.
Wow, absolutely incredible to hear the description firsthand. Now, obviously, I mentioned earlier on about the mindset aspect before we started recording, and I'd like to touch on that because even though running is a physical thing, obviously, you have to have a strong will and a strong mind, a strong belief that you can reach the end of the race and everything. And basically, I'm curious to get into your process for preparing for something so arduous. I mean, you obviously enjoy it, which comes over, but there is the difficult terrain. There are going to be things that don't go to plan. There's obviously pain barriers you have to push through as well, physically, I'd imagine, with that many miles. So I'm curious to touch on basically how you mentally prepare for the race in terms of in advance to it, but then when you're actually running as well, what's going through your mind during that many miles, if that makes sense, and to get a little insight into what's inside your head, because that's obviously the bit that people don't see as such. They hear about the race, but they don't hear about how you actually condition yourself to that level. So if you could describe that, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I might have to delve quite deep, I think. But no, I think well, one of the main reasons, or one of the one of the ways in which I found myself, really pushing and going for long distance endurance races or runs, or I think it was partly like to as a way to prove myself that I can challenge myself and push myself, if that makes sense. So that's probably one of the foundations where I started from. And then whilst obviously before the race, as you touched on, sorry, it's a case of I need to make sure my kit is packed properly. I try out my kit, and then sometimes as well, obviously, during the training runs, before the race, there'll be times where you have to practice with the kit that you're going to be carrying on the race. So I make time for that as well. but not only that, I constantly I'm a big visualizer, if that makes sense. So sometimes I'll visualize the course, visualize some of the things that I might be doing on the race. But obviously, not everything goes according to plan, as you alluded to earlier. Uh, but then again, you kind of have to think about, what if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? But not necessarily go through every single thing, but just some essential bits that might go wrong. Just have a bit of a backup plan for those. Yeah, so for instance, you might be trying to eat something, and after a while, you might have stomach problems. I don't know, 50 miles into a 100-mile a race, and how do you cope? What do you do? What's the backup plan? Do you have some salt sachets or and so on and so forth, packed to dive into and use those. So it's just little things really. So it's a you and one of the good things about this is you're constantly learning and you're constantly improving, and seeking knowledge from other experienced runners as well, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's some very valuable life lessons that you touched on there, Zuki, with first of all, the visualization side of things, that comes up quite frequently when I interview people who've achieved great things as you have. But there's a number of little things you said there, obviously having backup plans, who you surround yourself with, very, very important. And I love that because those are great lessons that can be applied to any life area, really. It doesn't have to just be running. If you're looking to achieve a goal in education or business or a different sport or whatever, those sorts of things come into it. So very grateful for you sharing that because that's a big part of the reason why I do these. In terms of just to delve a little deeper into one other aspect there of during the race itself, um, you mentioned it about say having stomach problems or things like that, but pushing through those pain barriers. As fit as you are, I'd imagine in that many miles there is quite a pain barrier, maybe later in the race or something, correct me if I'm wrong. But how
Yeah.
do you sort of condition yourself to push past that basically when it does come?
Um, so I think sometimes you have to remind yourself of the why. What is your why in doing the activity or the thing that you're doing. So sometimes I think back to that, and then obviously my why is quite strong in the sense that you know I'm passionate about the outdoors for one, and then secondly, this is something that I enjoy, just being out there in the wilderness and pushing myself, testing my limits, and seeing how far I can go. Yes, and yeah, so it's something that I'm passionate about, if that makes sense. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. I mean, obviously your face lights up when you talk about it. So obviously, passion for what you do, it's a wonderful thing. And you know what they say, I mean, do something you love and you never have to work a day in your life. And I feel that in a sense, in one sense, that sort of applies to the races because even though it's difficult, you love it. I'm glad that you touched on the motivation as well and having a strong purpose behind what you do. Um, Again, that's very applicable to life. Now, in a moment, I'd like to touch on a few other things, including your ambassadorships and the inclusivity in racing. Before we do, one more question about races specifically. Now, you have obviously run on all types of terrain, so I think it will be fascinating for people to find out basically what the toughest race was in terms of the environmental factors. So you mentioned one earlier that was on like a very warm day, for example. You mentioned another one being very hilly and sort of, running up and down those sorts of regions. So I'm just curious as to which one had the most sort of grueling terrain and layout, if that makes sense.
the toughest. Just let me think. I would probably say the Bob Graham round is probably the toughest that I've done. So the Bob Graham round is it's about 67 miles, and the elevation total ascent climb is about 27,000 feet plus. So obviously, in order to get into the club, with the club is doing the round in sub 24 hours basically. So I completed the round in 24 hours and 50 minutes. So I was 50 minutes out of getting into the club, if that makes sense. So I mentioned that partly for a few reasons. The first one being obviously, although I was unsuccessful in getting into the club itself, but I still see that as it's a failure, but I still see it as a success because one, I really enjoyed going around the round and completing the round, and it was tough, brutal, but enjoyable at the same time, and beautiful as well. It's in the Lake District, so a really beautiful part of the country. Um, yeah, so and also I just want to celebrate that failure as well, if that makes sense. I just don't want I try not to focus solely on the wins. So I think, obviously, for reasons, some of the reasons are is that, I learned a lot from that, and from that experience, and yeah, I'd put it as my favorite, although I was bruised by it, but I'll put it as my favorite. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, it really does. I mean, in terms of enjoying the process as well. I mean, this is something that you touched on there. Again, very valuable life lesson. And again, something funnily enough that comes up in a lot of interviews I do, is not being solely focused on the result, but just focused on getting a little bit better day by day, or in your case with that race, or with many of the races, enjoying well, obviously the many miles that it takes to get to the finish line. So I think that's a very valuable lesson. Now, in terms of the broadening out slightly with these topics, you're very passionate about inclusivity in the running world, and it's something you do a lot of work with, and basically representing people from different backgrounds, which I think is immensely valuable. And I was reading about that, and I was reading about some of these talks with some of these races being represented, at least in the media aspect, almost entirely of white people, to put it simply and to put it bluntly, which I was surprised at because a lot of the greatest runners in history have been African, if we look at it from that point of view. So I was surprised of, that basis. But in your own words, can you share with us a little bit about your thoughts in terms of inclusivity in races, maybe some areas where it has improved, maybe some areas where it still needs to improve? It's quite a big question, so I don't mind where we go with this, but you're
Yeah.
well versed in the topic, so I'll leave that to you to share a little bit of that with us, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, myself as well. It's a topic I'm continuously learning more about, as time goes on. But there, no, so I I I also became a crew member for the campaign charity group called Black Trail Runners. So Black Trail Runners are obviously campaigning to increase the numbers of people from ethnic minority backgrounds, so Black people and people of color that take part in trail running. So their focus is trail running, and also for myself as well. So obviously it's the outdoors and trail running, to be precise. So we're trying to increase the numbers there, and get more people to take part, and they're doing a great job in doing that. So if people can support Black Trail Runners in any way they can, please reach out to them and support them. And they are trying to eliminate some of the barriers. There are barriers obviously from other people. For instance, within the UK, most people from ethnic minority backgrounds, they're likely to be living in urban areas, or in cities, if that makes sense. So they're away from the trail running spaces or the outdoors a bit more. So, and obviously some of the barriers from that, another barrier, sorry, another layer to that is, you know, people obviously find it a bit difficult to go from where they live to the outdoor spaces. You're talking, they might have to use multiple modes of transport, so public transport, different connections, and so on and so forth. But not only that, but it's also the issue might be kit as well. Certain outdoor pieces of equipment are not that cheap, to put it bluntly. So obviously there's the cost as well. So again, Black Trail Runners are helping with all those things. They provide some grants when it comes, and they can loan out kit as well. They loan out kit to certain individuals. Yeah, and they help cover race entry fees as well. So those are barriers that I've just touched on there. A few of the barriers that I've touched on there. So that's that we're trying to help people with. Yeah, and they're doing a great job in that space.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful cause, and it's a wonderful well, it's a wonderful ideal, and there's wonderful meaning behind that. So yes, hopefully putting that out there continues to raise awareness and everything. And as you say, it should be open to everyone. So it's good to hear that they're doing such great work. And also on that topic, you are an ambassador to a number of organizations, but just focusing a moment on the North Face Explorer team and everything, I'd just like to get your thoughts for a moment on what that means to you, really. Again, I know I'm asking that a little bit broadly, but what it means to you to be a part of that team, and when you were first invited, how you felt. Anything you'd like to share about that as another wonderful accolade in your life?
Yeah. Thank you very much. No, no. The Yeah, being a part of the North Face Explorer team, it's been an honor. I think I was talking to someone just yesterday about uh the journey, obviously, just that I've made so far. Obviously, I just became a member of the North Face Explorer team just 6 months ago, so in January. Yeah, it's great, and it's really good in a number of ways, because obviously they, first of all, they do outstanding kit. So outdoor the kit that I use on a daily basis. So that's very helpful, and their support means a great deal to me as well. um and again, we touched on the barriers there. So just uh assistance with something like that, with the kit, it makes a huge difference into someone who's passionate about the outdoors. And I've been quite lucky enough to be able to obviously be a member of their team and be supported by them, so I'm hugely grateful for that. And I became I connected with them through Black Trail Runners, because they were supporting the Black Trail Runners podcast. And I think initially they had asked some members from the Black Trail Runners community, to send in some videos. I think they were making an ad at the time, and they were going to feature those videos of us running on the ad. And then we had to, I think a couple of us, got put forward, and then we wrote a little bit about ourselves. I think at that time I'd recently won that virtual challenge of 874 miles in 29 days. So obviously I mentioned that, and then I think within a few days, and then we connected with I connected with the North Face, and then yeah, it's been a great relationship ever since. Yeah, it's been good.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, that's amazing to hear the inside track on how that came to be and what that means to you in many ways. And of course, you do have a couple of other ambassadorships as well, as I mentioned at the beginning, with Sun Guards and
Yeah.
the Lake District as well. So can you touch a little bit on what those entail? And then after this, we'll talk a little bit about your future plans, and then that's pretty much everything. But it's just to give the ambassadorships a mention, I think is very worthy. So please do tell us a little bit more about those for anyone who's not in the know.
Yeah, of course. I mean, another one to add, sorry, on with the North Face, obviously they're very passionate about being inclusive and diversity as well. So this goes to, the ads that they make. They try to make sure that they feature different people from our society, the society that we live in. And then also with the Northeast Explorer team, obviously the members are they have different backgrounds as well. So that's been great to see from them. And then also, so like you touched on there, so I'm also an ambassador for Sun God. Again, head of community there. So Joanna is, they're amazing as well. Sun God. So again, they're doing great work, and not only just on the inclusivity bit, but also the product as well. With they're BTEC certified, and they're also their focus is it's sustainability. It's a great model for most companies to try and aspire to. And then I'm also the ambassador for the Lake District Sky Trails. So and I've got my first sky race actually in about a couple of weeks. So again, so Lake District Sky Trails, they're trying to just make sure that within the sky running events that they organize, they're trying to make sure that there is diversity there as well. So that's one of the reasons why I became a part of the ambassadorship team. So they reached out to me just to make sure that they're doing some right things, if that makes sense, or for me to assist in a small way, obviously. Yeah. So that's been great. Yeah, and then I'm also a crew member for Black Trail Runners. Yeah, so that's it.
Wow. Well, you're a busy man, but it is wonderful work that you're doing with basically this cause orientation, because I always say that aiming to help people, contribute to people's lives, contribute to a cause that is bigger than ourselves in some way is one of the highest aims that we can aspire to in life, in my personal opinion. So given the fact that you're doing this work that does impact people's lives in a positive way, and obviously it's not just you, it's the whole organization and you're part of it, but it is wonderful, wonderful work. So that's why I really wanted to highlight those just a little bit. So yeah, so you mentioned your first sky race coming up as well. Let's talk a little bit about the future, because when we first started speaking, when I messaged you on Facebook, you mentioned that you have a number of things coming up. So let's talk about some of your future plans. I don't mind how far ahead in time you want to go with this, or how near in the future, or how far. That's entirely up to you. But let's just talk about a few things that you're aiming for from here, basically.
Oh yeah, so so got the Sky Race in 2 weeks time. So that will be my first mountain race, like truly mountainous race. So that's 28 Ks in the Lake District. And then after that, in September, I've got a race called the Dragon's Back Race. That's in Wales. So that's about 380 Ks. It's a stage race, so you do a certain number of Ks starting on the Monday, and then get to the end point at the end of the day. Obviously, there's a time limit at the end, so you need to reach the final checkpoint by a certain time. Then the next day, you're up in the morning, you go in again, all the way until we finish on the Saturday. So that's the Dragon's Back race. And then also I'm just finalizing a few bits about being involved in raising some money for the charity Walking Wounded. So they help raise some funds for veterans and serving soldiers as well. So Walking Wounded, I might be doing the Marathon des Sables next year, 2024. If I can't make that one, then it will be 2025. But I should be able to do the 2024 race. So that one is in the desert. So it's another stage race. So again, it's about, I think it's about 300K. So don't quote me on the distance. Sorry. Yeah. So it's the Marathon des Sables in Morocco. Next year I'm looking to do. And then yeah, further to that, I'll probably try and come back to making hopefully a successful attempt at the Bob Graham round. Yeah, sometime next year. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there's some amazing races, some amazing opportunities out there ahead of you. So I love that, the fact that you've achieved so much, but you're still pushing the limits and pushing the boundaries further in terms of, as you said it earlier on, testing yourself and proving points to yourself and everything like that. I love the motivation. Some very, very powerful points in here that will help people in life, I believe, as well. So we'll close up pretty much with one final point, which is just to underpin the life lessons that you've shared all the way through this. Um, People starting out with a dream or a goal, people who want to achieve something. As I said earlier, a lot of the things that you shared apply to not only to racing, although there'll definitely be runners watching this, but in terms of people who want to succeed in business, they want to succeed in education, they want to succeed in these things. Final question for you: if somebody is watching this and they have a dream, they have a goal, but they don't know exactly where to start, or maybe they're just starting out, but they're in the early days. This doesn't have to be running specific, but what would be one or two things you would say to them? Because it's a big question, so to try and narrow
Yeah,
the,
that's
the
okay.
one or two things that you would share with people to sort of inspire them, motivate them, whatever you want to call it, to give them a little nuggets of wisdom. Because throughout this, there's quite a few that you've mentioned where I thought, wow, that's a good life lesson. So, but for anybody who's just getting started or wants to achieve a dream, because you're quite a few, using the running term, you're quite a few miles into your dreams and goals, if you like, figuratively
Mm.
speaking, even though the best is yet to come. But for somebody who's just starting the race, so to speak, of whatever their goal is, what would you say to those people, please?
Um, well, obviously, I am continuously learning myself, and always seeking advice as well. So I'll share, yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, I would say, uh, stay focused on what your goal is, um, and I would say, keep striving, keep pushing, and keep believing in yourself. And at times you might be closer to that goal more than you realize. Um, but I would say, yeah, stay focused and keep pushing. Um, and then write your goals down as well. That works for me. And yeah, I think yeah, keep pushing and stay focused. I would say, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's great advice. And the thing is, Zukie, you've mentioned quite a few things as we've gone through the call. And I know you're a very humble person and you're still learning and you're still growing. So I never put people on a pedestal saying, oh, he's
I
perfect
know. So.
because he's an athlete. But at the same time, you've achieved so much and you've pushed past, I imagine in your journey, you've pushed past boundaries where you've sort of maybe exceeded your own expectations or whatnot, and you're continuing to push that. So from that point of view, you're in a prime position to share those little bits of advice. It's good because people hear that who may not have the chance to hear that otherwise from you. So hopefully that will filter down and help some people. I'd like to thank you for your time. I'd like to say that it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
I
Uh,
have too. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. Because honestly, I knew it would be a great interview, but it's really ticked all the boxes because we've had some fun stories from the races, but then we've also had the deeper wisdom and some of what you've gained and sort of a nice balance there in my view. So thank you very much and good luck for those next steps as well, as Sky Race, I think is the nearest one. So
Yeah.
good luck for that, and I'm sure it'll go really well for you. I hope it does.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much, Liam, and thank you for having me on. And yeah, I look forward to when the podcast is launched as well. And yeah, keep doing the great work that you're doing as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. And yeah, as soon as it's out there, I'll let you know. So thank you. You enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.